welcome on behalf of the University to you all here this evening for a very special evening. In fact, this is a very special week for the University, our Interfaith Week, full of activities across between faiths.
My name is Faraday. I have been living in Swansea for about 45 years, and I have most of life worked in the Swansea University. I represent Hinduism, and as you know, Hinduism is not an organized religion, so I'm just like an ad hoc lay person who has interest, and I represent a meditation and yoga center which doubles as a temple in Uplands in Swansea, which has been running for the last 10-12 years.
I'm Rufus Maychild, and I'm here to represent the pagan religions, also known as the earth religions. That's right. That's a very broad remit. I've been a pagan all my adult life, which seems to be quite a long time now. So I got quite used to it. What else can I say for you? I am specifically also a representative for the Fellowship of ISIS.
My name is Norma Glass. I'm Jewish. I'm a proud Welsh Jew. I was born here in Swansea. I've lived my life in Swansea, and looking at my wrinkles, I hope that I will be buried in Oystermouth Cemetery.
I was going to say we chose near hymns, but that's the wrong thing.
The only claim that I have is, because of my age, I think I should be the first to talk about God.
Just in case. I'll come to you first, I promise.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Arjan Ali. I'm actually representing the Muslim community informally, because I used to be the chairman of Swansea Mosque up to February 16 or something. 16. So I was formally representing, now I'm informally representing the Muslim community in general. I've been in Swansea since 1981, July the 21st. I remember the day very, very well. It's a very beautiful city, and it's a great city that I owe a lot to, and I really enjoy being in this Swansea, and as well as with the rest of the Muslim community. And it's a great pleasure to be here with you today.
Hi, I'm Aaron from here. I went to Thailand to study Buddhism and became a monk. I'm here today to present what I thought initially was going to be Theravada Buddhism and the concept of God. But realizing that through study that there's a lot more incorporated into the teachings of Buddha through various schools. And so here, hopefully tonight, I will present those to you in a way that is respectful to all schools of Buddhism.
Hello, I'm Leslie. I'm a Methodist minister, so I'm here representing the Christian faith. I feel a little bit like my friend on the left who described himself as ad hoc. I feel a little bit ad hoc in the same way that I guess the Christian faith is a spectrum, and so much of what I say I can only say for myself. But I'm delighted to be here. I'm minister in Uniting Church Sketty, in the Wesley congregation in Kidda, and associate chaplain here at the university. And I've only been in Swansea for 5 years.
There are three particular questions which we're going to ask the panellists to talk about, and I'll deal with those individually. And then if we have time, depending on how much time I allocate to the questions, I'm hoping there may be the opportunity for some interaction with you.
One thing I will say is that every Jew, most Jews, say the 13 principles of faith. Well, I'm not going to say them all, but I think it does show, and this is from the morning service, and this is what we say in Hebrew, but I'll give you the English. I believe with perfect faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, is the author and guide of everything that has been created, and that he alone has made, does make, and will make all things. I believe with perfect faith that the Creator, blessed be his name, is a unity, and that there is no unity in any manner like unto his, and that he alone is our God, who was, is and will be. And that really, I feel, tells you how we feel, that God is in everything, God is in every action. And, you know, Jewish men are reminded from and women, the first thing we say in our prayers is, thank you, God, for bringing us through the night. But a Jewish man puts on phylacteries. Have you seen phylacteries? I brought a set along. They're little wooden boxes with straps, right? Wound round, you can't see that. I've opened one. One goes on, now looks very weird, but one goes on the head and one goes on the working arm facing into the heart. And this is what I call Jewish yoga. It puts a Jewish person into the mind to speak to God. Because the one there, it's in the center. So in everything I see today, let it be God in your sight. In every thought I have in my brain, let it be with your guidance. In everything I hear today, God, let it be in your hearing. And the one that's facing into the heart, in every emotion I feel, let it be with your love. And the working arm, in every action I take today, God, let it be with your help. And the other things, of course, are the prayer shawl. You all know that Jewish people were given the 10 Commandments by God, and that's what we live by, our moral code. Jewish people love a bargain. We were offered another 603. We have 613 rules. And on the prayer shawl, if you bother to count the fringes, you come to 613. And on the corners, there are tassels with 5 knots reminding us of the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses. And you know, a Jewish man covers his head. Why? It's God's special crash helmet. It reminds him as well, the power of God is everywhere, but man's power is capped. And I feel very capped tonight. I really do.
As pagans, we mostly don't use that word with a big G. Because for us, it's a stop. It stops us thinking in other ways. Because as pagans, as earth religion folks, we think in quite different ways. And we feel, usually at least, because I'm speaking partly for myself, and then almost every pagan in the universe might well disagree with me at various points. We think that that word, it sort of directs the way in which we think, so that we can only think certain things, we can only ask certain questions, as well as only getting certain answers. So now the other option we had was the divine. Well, I'm not entirely happy with that either, because for pagans, there isn't that separation, that dichotomy, if you like, between the physical and the spiritual, or between the mundane and the spiritual, or between earth and heaven, or any of those oppositions. So we might say that all things have spirit. And when I say all things, I don't just mean nice cuddly rabbits and squirrels, but also the things we don't like. The creepy crawlies, and the bugs, and the slime, and the mountains, and the trees, and the rivers, and indeed lots more things that are far beyond us, because this planet of ours is just a little backwater in the cosmos, which is awfully big. So our perspectives are a bit different in that sort of respect. Now, in saying that we think of everything as having spirit, we also think of there being spirits. That is, things a bit like us, which have consciousness and agency. We're all aware of ourselves. As individuals, we have consciousness, we have an identity, we can make choices in our lives. But we tend to think we're the only things that can. So, in thinking that there are other things in this universe that can think besides ourselves or besides one big thing, we will say that the spirits are everywhere. So it's not like a sort of diluted bit of spirit in everything. It's more that we see the entire universe as active, as conscious, as indeed as a people. They're just not human people.
The answers to these questions have come from two sources for us. There are those who think themselves and come up to some conclusion themselves. The others have come from teachers, gurus, philosophers, thinkers, sages, whatever title you want to give them. And they have thought about these questions and have come up with a collective answers, or a list of questions. Some of these questions are actually on the realm of metaphysics, meaning beyond areas which you and I can take something and measure it and say, yes, this is accurate, this is not accurate. Because it's metaphysics. It's outside the physical world. A scientist may reach the conclusion whether the universe was created or it came as a result of an accident. That's possible. But it can't answer the question who created it, because that would be in the realm of metaphysics. So in the realm of metaphysics, we have people who are philosophers, thinkers, sages. They give us a list of answers. The second group have been a small number of people who made a very bold claim. They said, we have been sent by the Creator to tell humanity that we are here to guide them to the way that God or the Creator, whichever word you want to use, want us to follow. So this small group of people, most of us, they are largely later than Abrahamic faith, be it Jesus, Moses, Muhammad, peace and blessing God be upon them all. They gave us a framework, a guideline. Some of them have books revealed to them, others came as teachers to guide people to mankind. So Islamic perspective is we believe that Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, was also a messenger from God, who came to tell us about who God is and what God wants us to do on earth. So my perspective, the answer to the question I'll be giving you is what we received in terms of that teaching. It is not from my own thinking as such. So the first fundamental principle that we believe about God, again we share a lot common with Abrahamic faith, and that's probably described best in chapter 112 of the Quran, in which God says, say, Qul huwa Allahu ahad, say He is Allah, the Creator, one and only. Allahu Samad, God, the eternal, the absolute. The best translation is self-sufficient. God is the independent being. Everything else is dependent upon God, but God is not dependent on anything or anyone. So that's the thing, next part. Then God said, Lam yalid wa lam yulad, that God is not the father of anyone, and nor is the offspring of anyone. Wa lam yakun lahu kufuwan ahad, and there is nothing like unto God. So whatever imagination we come up with God, it will be my imagination, his imagination, we'll argue over it. But nobody can comprehend God in the physical attributes, because that is beyond human capability. But what we know God is through his attributes. So the most common attribute the Muslims are very familiar with, they should be very familiar with, which is mentioned in the Quran. The first attribute is, he is Ar-Rahman, the intensely merciful. He is Ar-Rahim, the continuously merciful. He also describes the Al-Ghafur, the oft-forgiving. Continuously forgives. Human beings turn, he forgives. They turn again, he forgives. And Al-Wadud, the all-loving, the holy, these are the names that we have of God, of knowing the attributes of God. The nature, physical nature is out of bounds. We believe that nobody can see God on earth. It is only when we pass away to the other life that we will see God. So this is Islamic belief. The real crux of who God is in Islam is described by one word in Arabic, which is called Tawheed, which means oneness of God. With Islamic principle, everything pins around the belief that there is only one God. He has no partners, no associates, and he is alone and supreme in his being. That does not mean God is very distant from us. Very transcendent, right up at the sky, is not really concerned. God is also very close to us. We are told in the Quran, He is closer to us than our jagged veil. He is with us wherever we may be. And His mercy transcends all things. The first law that God wrote down before He created the universe is that His mercy shall prevail. His mercy shall prevail. And also in the Quran, God Himself said He has prescribed for Himself mercy. So Muslims' general understanding of God, He is one, He is alone. Yes, He is all-knowing, all-seeing, all-powerful, yet He is all-merciful. And mercy transcends to everything in creation. And that's another quick word that in Islam we use a lot, is the word called Rabb. Rabb is used as, translation in English as Lord or Master. But it literally means something that nurtures us. So from the moment before my conception to the moment that I die, the nurture of God is with me. Not only with me, but all of creation. And as a result, we are here as human beings to follow that teachings of God in order that we may receive that mercy.
I think as a Christian, I would want to maybe in a bit of a nutshell say sort of three things. First of all, I would want to pick up on God being beyond us, God being other than us. But kind of in contradiction to that, I would also want to say that God is nearer to us than the breath that we breathe. And for me as a Christian, I particularly see this in what we call the incarnation, the presence of Jesus on earth. So another thing that Christians would say is the God we believe in is the God that we see in Jesus. So we look to see what was important to Jesus, how did he live his life, and we would see something of God in that. We would see God coming close to us in the very presence of Jesus. And then, so if we take Jesus, then you could say multiple things, I guess, but two things for me stand out. First of all, that there is something, light is important as an image when we come to thinking about God. I think that's really important, light shining in the darkness. So as Christians, that's a really significant image, and I think the other very significant image or word that we would want to use, maybe it's similar to mercy, I'm not quite sure, but the word I think Christians would want to use is love. We would say God is love, and we would absolutely see this in the person of Jesus. And when we look at what he did, how he ate with prostitutes, how he talked with sinners, we would want to say that God is all-loving and all-inclusive in the way that God relates to all humankind. Actually, all we can say is really metaphor. We can only say that God is like something. I think none of us can say God, we know what God is like. The minute we say we know absolutely what God is like, then I think we're making a mistake. We can never know fully. So everything we say is a fumbling towards a seeking of God in our lives, and therefore in some way a metaphor.
Namaste to everyone on the panel. Namaste to all of you there, madam. You there. Namaste. The word has got three words combined together. It's a Sanskrit word. Namah means I bow. I bow. The word Namah means bow. As means I. Te is like in French too. You. I bow to the soul, the God within you. And that is the basic starting point, as I see. Of course, Hinduism is a very, very old religion. Its origins are traced thousands and thousands of years ago. So it has lots of perspectives, but the perspective I'm representing or is all encompassing, trying to explain what we believe in. So we believe God is in you all. We have been created by Him. He has created us like Himself. But all of us are different. Have you met two people identical? Everything same? No. Made us different as well. Before Hinduism, the word Hinduism or Hindu was given by Persians. Persians cannot pronounce the sound S. So when they crossed over to India from the mountains, from the passes, and they found this river which was called Sindh. And Sindh they couldn't pronounce, so they started saying Hind. So that, and the people living around, they were living in the Indus Valley in Sindh, they became Hindu. They said Sindhu, but they became Hindu. That's the origin of the word Hindu. The religion is very old, we have, it's not very well organized. I mean, a lot of religions are organized, but Hinduism is not organized religion. And it's fortunate, and sometimes it's a very disadvantageous as well. I don't want to reflect on that. But it's not just you who are created by God, all the animals. We pray to the animals as well. Everyone knows that Ganesha, whose worship we do at the starting of every function, he's got an elephant head. We worship monkeys, Hanuman, he's a monkey. But we respect him, we worship him as well. Because he has also got the soul of God created by him for a purpose. Even a little insect, nothing in the world has been created by him which has no purpose. This all comes to the environment now. We killed all the things underneath the Mother Earth. Yeah? They were creating a single earthworm, creates a tunnel 2 kilometers in length every year. It makes the soil fertile, it makes the soil porous, which absorbs water, which prevents floods. There was a big role of that. So we say namaste to all of them as well. The basic principle is do not hurt anyone. We worship the mountains as well. Mountains, Govardhan Puja, a certain day, a certain mountain is worshipped because they are also made by him. They are not even a piece of stone. Don't hurt anyone without a purpose, without, and unless if you can avoid it, you have to avoid it. But if you have to make all means so that they are rehabilitated, they are protected. So that is the idea of respect everyone and hurt no. That's, now if you see, God has revealed himself. So all the people think that have you got one God or how many hundreds, thousands of gods you got? God, in our belief, he comes himself. Yada yada dharmasya glane bhavabharata. Whenever in the world there will be chaos and there will be disaster imminent, created by humans, I will appear on the earth in the human form to advise you, protect you, and guide you. So, that's why we have incarnations, and the recorded incarnations. Lord Brown was born on the 10th of January 5114 BC, and this is because the date of birth can be pinpointed by the position of planets in at that time, which have been described in the poetry. A certain sun was in a certain house, Mercury in another house. So on the basis of that, the scientists now with supercomputers have worked out what we did. So he has come and he has come again, and he will come again as well. How does he look like? How does our God look like? You can see, you can feel, but you cannot see with these eyes. You cannot hear him with these ears, because they are too weak. If you remember, it was only 50, 100 years ago, we had telescopes could see only 5 miles away. We could see a microscope and we couldn't identify very much. An eagle can spot the prey from 2 miles, 3 miles up in the air, running, and we can't. A dog can hear, we can't. Our eyes are not perfect, our senses are not perfect. But if you try to tune to him, you can get the vibrations. So when you rise up, you become mindful, you worship him, you see God. God every day. How can I hurt him? What is the nature? He is merciful. I agree. Most of people say he's merciful. But he also says he's the one who described Newton's third law in 5000 BC. No, 3100. In one of the phrases he says that I cannot. You get the result of your karma, no matter what. What you have done, so you will reap. That's what is coming. You have done some actions. For that actions, there will be a reaction. That's the Newton's law. But he said, I also cannot prevent it. If you have done something, the reaction will be there. All I can do is, if you pray to me, you are with me, then I can relieve your suffering. I can relieve your suffering. It's a long journey. We are all here. We are all here together. And he revealed himself in Bhagavad Gita, and he gave Arjuna, who was the disciple, if you know the story, special eyes. And he said, you cannot see me. And what was happening is that he is as tiny as the smallest nanotube in the terms of modern nano powder. You can't see. And he's so large, larger than the whole universe. So you cannot see with his mortal eyes. So that is how is the Hindu God.
When I was asked to come tonight, I thought it would be quite easy to explain the Theravada concept of God, because there isn't one. Actually, the Buddha didn't actually say there was no God. There are many gods. There are God realms, there are devil realms and angel realms and all kinds of things in the Buddhist teachings. But again, as one of our friends Olien mentioned earlier, it's a God with a small g, or many gods with small g's. They are dependent beings. They depend on, as indeed we all do, dependent origination. So therefore they're imperfect, even though they're on a very high advanced level. In preparing for this, I posted something on Facebook about a month ago, which was a teaching by a Theravada monk, in which he clearly stated that God was redundant in the Buddhist perspective, with respect. So that God was redundant only because Buddhism is basically pure psychology. It's seeing our own minds, it's looking inward, it's uprooting all of our delusions and our defilements and our greed, jealousy and delusion, everything, all the negatives, and developing within ourselves the positive attributes of mankind: compassion, generosity, kindness, loving kindness, etc., etc. And so therefore, to do that work, it's about looking inward. It has nothing to do with being reliant on any exterior source. In that research, and posting that on Facebook, I had a lot of very irate friends that are part of the Pure Land Buddhism that were yelling at me that Buddha is a god. Okay. So it began quite a big debate. So where they're coming from is a teaching in the Pali Canon of the Mahabrahma through meditation. I'm nervous, as you can tell, I'm sorry. Mahabrahma through meditation attained what we call the jhana states. They're the levels of meditation that proceed and can take us ultimately to enlightenment, to the state of full realization of fundamental reality. Mahabrahma, in accomplishing those states, there's a certain stage of that which is a blackout stage, and then he moved from that directly into nirvana. In doing so, awakening again in nirvana, he realized he was the only person there, because he was the very first. So therefore, he's sort of, oh, well, there is nobody. There's nobody else. Slowly, as time went on, other people appeared in that same realm. They perceived him to be the leader. They perceived him to be the creator. They perceived him to be God, as it were. So from that precept, the people in the Pure Land Buddhism believe that Mahabrahma is indeed a god. They also believe that they need, because it was established in the teachings that man was no longer capable by ourselves of attaining enlightenment. We're no longer capable in ourselves of purifying mind to the degree that we need to. And so therefore, their Buddha, Amitabha, who is indeed an enlightened Buddha in the Mahayana tradition, Amitabha is somebody that the people in the Pure Land tradition will make requests to, and they worship, and they pray to, in the hope that he will, by grace, as is the case with Jesus, will take them to the next rebirth, which will enable them, therefore, to attain enlightenment. Without the grace of Amitabha, they believe that they cannot go forward. So, Buddha in the Theravada, the Mahayana, is a huge teaching, many teachings, 84,000 teachings of the Buddha altogether, I believe. Their concepts vary dramatically, but coming back to the Theravada, ultimately what the Buddha said was that the work is to be done within each of us by ourselves. I've written notes and I'm not looking at them. Buddha said, gripped by fear, men go to the sacred mountains, the sacred groves, the sacred trees, and the sacred shrines. In other words, through fear, through insecurity, we try to cling on to something exterior to prove to ourselves our worth, to prove to ourselves our divinity, to prove to ourselves that we can actually accomplish what we need to accomplish. He then went on to talk about how the fact that the Mahabrahma was a deluded being. When Buddha reached enlightenment, he went to all the various realms, the heaven realms, the Deity realms, the hell realms, and he talked with Mahabrahma and he said to him, "You're not the first, you're deluded." That's pretty much the precept of, that's the teaching of the Buddha from the Theravada principle of what God is. Common belief amongst many Buddhists that the deities can be influenced. So we have no precept of prayer in Theravada Buddhism. I know in the Mahayana there's quite a lot of prayer that goes on. But I think, if I'm correct in the Mahayana, I think it's based on more of affirmations, of telling ourselves on a daily basis what our goals are, what we hope to attain, reminding ourselves that every living being has the seed of potential in them, that every one of us longs for the same thing. We long for happiness, we long for love, we love to be cherished and to be safe. And indeed there's a very beautiful sutta in which the Buddha taught the principle of the lotus. The lotus you will have seen is very often at the base of where the Buddha sits, the lotus flower. And the reason the lotus appears so much in Buddhism is because of the principle that a lotus grows up through the mud, through the water, through the murk, through the mire. When it first opens, its head appears above the water. As it opens, the leaves are brown and battered and not attractive at all. But slowly, as the flower begins to unfold, it becomes more and more pure, it becomes more and more white in colour. And indeed, it also has, the lotus flower has an oil on its leaves that no matter what is dropped onto those leaves, once it's open and in full bloom, standing proudly above the water, whatever's dropped onto that, it naturally just flows off. The Buddha saw that as the ability and the possibility and the capability of each and every living being, from every animal, from every bug, from every human being, that we all have that potential within us. And based on that, we therefore have absolute equanimity, we have no room for prejudice, we have no room for bias, we have no room for anti-anything. That every living being must be cherished and seen for the potential that they have to become a Buddha, to become an enlightened being.
We'll move on to the second question. One of the great questions again, but who are we and why are we here? Who are we and why are we here? And to begin, I think I'm going to go to Gian, please. Who are we and why are we here? In 2 minutes.
I think I'll take up the second part of the question. Why are we here? This is all to do with our belief in reincarnation. Our belief is that the soul is eternal, it doesn't die, it is the body which dies. And you take birth again, which is considered also very painful. You don't remember but they say, or at least our scriptures say, you feel happy, in life, but you don't remember the pain of birth, and you haven't seen the pain of death as well. So that's why our thinking is, life is here to enjoy. And this Western culture, we are all getting Westernized. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy your meal. This life is meant to enjoy. But we have to think. Are we here just to enjoy? Are the animals? Everybody is enjoying. They have got brain. They can think like us. The power in the brain is only given to human beings. We are the privileged species. And if we don't want to use our brain and simply enjoy ourselves, that is not true. This is the great opportunity to be born as a human being. It's probably 864,000 births. Then you get a chance to be elevated to the human being. We have got this life. You're all fellow travelers. You also have been born, I have been also born. And all I know, we have met before. If you look at your close friends, your family, your children, you know. If you try to see, you have met them at some other time. So the basic is to make a progress in this life so that you can be closer to Him and eventually, after many births and deaths, get the moksha, the nirvana. Then you live in eternal happiness. You live in eternal happiness and don't have to be born and die again.
Well, I've got at least 4 invisible hats on this evening. In one sense, I'm trying to speak for all the pagans that have ever been, which is really most of the human race that has ever been, as far as I'm concerned. I'm also speaking for all those whom we might call modern pagans, sometimes called neo-pagans. I'm speaking for my particular group, the Fellowship of Isis, and I'm speaking for myself because, as I said earlier, I can be absolutely sure that almost anything I say to the pagans, they'll disagree with me.
Well, I think say what you think rather than what you think other people would want you to think.
Sure. There was a couple of things, which I have to go back to the first of the questions just very quickly, which we really need to say. That word with a big G, if we were going to have one word that was a bit like that, it would actually be goddess. Now, spot, shock, horror, that's a word which relates to the female. Whereas most people who talk about that big G, they only talk about it as if it is male. Sometimes they're very insistent on it. Now, I can talk about that all night, which obviously I'm not going to be in a position to do, but that is fundamental to us. And that's important. It's important to stress that word, goddess. The other thing that's important is that for us, we think, although we can't totally know the nature of deity, nonetheless, they are present to us. And I believe that we are all inspired by the deities every single day, mostly in rather small ways, because it would be wonderful, as Norma was saying, if they would just sort of appear in front of us, singing, dancing, saying, we want you to do this. But they don't. So the inspiration is small usually, but it's real, and I believe it is present every day. And it can be no reason to think it's not true most of the time. Now, who are we? Why are we here? Why am I here? I'm here because I think primarily, apart from things to do with interfaith, which is the third question, I'm here because I have a spiritual vision, and it's not one that's unique to me. I'm sure many people have had it, and it's not a very happy one. I actually see in front of us in the future a wall of fire across the future, which is to say, I can't see through it. Now that is something that I don't believe has happened in the entirety of human existence until now. Our human beings have survived through the most awful of external circumstances. They've survived the world covered in ice. They've survived starvation and war. Okay, some people have simply died, but people have always thought that the earth herself, Mother Earth, would sustain it. I don't think that's true anymore. And that's what that wall of fire is, that we can't see through. I believe that the earth is screaming in pain, that her creatures are likewise screaming in pain, and that, well, indeed, many of us are too, and that time has run out for us to do something about it. I fear for the future. I have 3 now young grandchildren, and many of you will have grandchildren, many of you will have younger children of your own, and I fear for their future. Now, I'm not going to survive this century, for sure, but my grandchildren could certainly expect to be alive at the end of the century, and by that time, I would expect to see the sea splashing up against the doors of this building, because the waters are rising, the ice is melting, the world is changing. I thought about, in the northern traditions of paganism, they sometimes speak about beings they call the ice giants, beings that relate to the great ice caps and the glaciers. I see them weeping amongst other things, or shall we say, the great white bears. We've all seen pictures of them on the David Attenborough stuff, beautiful creatures, whether they're great big mums and dads or whether they're the cute little ones. They're drowning. I suspect that by the end of this century, my grandchildren will know that there are no longer any of the ice bears left in this world. And they will also know that it's what human beings have been doing that's made that the case. So if I'm here for anything other than just to happily gossip, which I can do all night, it's to say that it is urgent. In fact, it's long past urgency that we need to change what we are doing and our lives to stop hurting Mother Earth, certainly. Not just for ourselves, because Mother Earth isn't here for us. But we are only a small part of Mother Earth, and indeed she would survive our drowning. She survived all sorts of things. But yes, well, that's why I'm here. That is what I have to say, more than anything else. I'm happy to argue and discuss theology and everything, but who cares? That's what matters.
Okay.
We can talk about pie in the sky, and we can talk about whether it's fish pie or tofu pie, and that's great. But what matters is Mother Earth.
I think as a Jew, I am here to keep all my options open and to listen with respect to you all. And I can see right through all the discussions that we all really are going along to the same end, which is respect for each other in different ways, particularly the Abrahamic faiths. I feel that what you said, Arjan, I could have said. In all sincerity, I am pleased that I am able to say in my prayers, Thine, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, etc. And everything I see and do, it all reflects. Why am I here? I'm here because God created me and gave me the ability to be able to be a very small ambassador for the faith that I believe in.
This is again one of the fundamental questions, and I'll relate a very quick story. I read an article about Bertrand Russell, those of you may remember him, one of the greatest thinkers that England has produced for centuries. And he was once in a taxi going from one place to another. The taxi cab driver recognized him. So he turned around and asked him, what's it all about? The story is that he went silent. And right throughout the journey, he didn't answer a single thing. And he ended the journey, paid the cab and went. The point is, this question has been in the minds of thinkers right from the beginning of time. And it will always be. Because when you look around and you see, why am I here? And again, the questions I gave you in the previous answer. Why is this universe? How did it come about? Is there a creator? All those questions are interlinked. So the Islamic perspective, why I'm here, Now, for that, who am I first needs to be answered, which is that I am a human being, creation of God. Inside a human being, there are two main aspects. One is the animal side, which makes me exactly the same as any other of God's creation. I have the desires, the needs, all of those things. But inside me also something very special, which again we always argue about terminology. And that's why people, when they sit in multiple, oh, you're saying the same thing, but using different words. So we believe human beings have within them a ruh, which is in Arabic loosely translated as spirit. So this ruh makes us different, and that's why some of the scholars very beautifully describe that inside man there is an angel as well as an animal. So when a human being looks up and looks at the greater things in life, has a greater vision, he can become angelic. On the other hand, when he's looking at only himself, his selfish nature, his desire for things, his desire for wealth, power, and so on, the greed can destroy him. So there's that conflict going on within the human being based upon the dual nature that is within the human being. So there's that consciousness. The consciousness of what and what it is a long discussion, but generally speaking, within me, there is something that tells me when I do something right, yes, this is good, carry on, I like it. And when I'm trying to do something wrong, when I tell a lie, something in the back of my mind, you should have done that. I'll give you an example which I use a lot. When we were kids, there was no CCTV. So you go into a shop, and one of your friends disturbed the shopkeeper, and one of you put a chocolate bar in your pocket. Why don't I do that? Because I know somebody's watching me. So that's that consciousness, which moved me forward in life to do the thing that makes me, the real me, feel good. The real me. The real me feels good when I give charity. The real me feels good when I smile at somebody. The real me feels good when I share rather than I crave for myself. Whereas on the other side, when I become selfish, I get, and still I'm not satisfied. Still I'm not satisfied. I could own the entire world, but I won't be able to sleep at peace at night. I could be the richest, most famous person in the world, but there's no inner tranquility. So the inner tranquility comes in from pleasing the inner self, which is connected directly to God, and that is the purpose why we're here, is to live in this world, to fulfill our purposes by doing the things that God has instructed us to do. And I've hinted at some of those, prayer, worship, all of these things. But in Islam, the concept of worship is actually misunderstood, even by most Muslims. In Islam, worship is not constrained within prayer, 5 times a day, as you all know Muslims pray, or the fasting in month of Ramadan. In Islam, playing football with your friends is actually an act of worship. Sitting down, relaxing, drinking coffee with somebody is an act of worship. So everything within that life. So what is the purpose of my being here? Prophet Muhammad told us that this life is the cultivation ground of the hereafter. The real life is the one to come. We are here temporarily, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100 years. We will leave. So the real life, the one I'm going to really live, where that real me, which is inside, is going to go back to God, is the life to come in the next life. So you use this life, and that's why this life is very important. This life is very, very important. Some people say you only live once. So this life is essential for us. Because dust thou art, to dust thou returnest was not spoken of the soul. The body returns. The soul goes somewhere else. So the purpose of life, why am I here? Who I am? Composite creation, made up of the spirit and the physical. Then what is the purpose? Why am I here? What am I doing? Is in order to work towards that ultimate goal for my home in the hereafter. And in the Quran we are told that only those who go to God who bring a clean heart, pure heart, who cleanse themselves of all the things we all collectively agree are bad things. So this is the real purpose in life, real thing, is to work towards the life to come.
Buddha taught anatta, he taught non-self, that we perceive ourselves to be something that is inherently existent. He says that's delusional, that we're actually not inherently existent. There is a part of us, there is a consciousness, there's an atma, that our friend here referred to when he talked about karma, the teachings of karma. And also, our mutual friend here has also just mentioned the part that we'll go on to, in his case, to be with God. The Buddha taught the same principle, that that little part of our consciousness that is constantly developing karma, be it positive, neutral, or negative, depending on our words, on our actions, on what we do in life, that has to be purified, so that we continue on the process from one birth to the next, each time becoming more enlightened, each time becoming more godlike, each time becoming more purified, and ultimately ending up in nirvana, heavenly realm, whatever we want to choose to call that. So Who are we? It's a very, very complicated, that whole teaching of non-self is very, very complicated in Buddhism itself, but it's well worth investigating. When we look at it and we realize, and we can see through meditation, we can see through deep meditation, that the complete separation of body and mind. We're not allowed to talk personally about our own experiences, but I can tell you that that is something that is very evident when you meditate for a period of time, that you can, this consciousness here is completely separate from the physical, as we've all discussed, the passing, the passing to dust, etc., etc. So, what is our purpose here in life? Our purpose in life is to purify our minds, to practice kindness, to practice generosity, to follow the precepts of Jesus, because I joke that he was a very good Buddhist. And I think, in fact, he was indeed, because I think pretty much everything that Jesus taught is what Buddha taught 600 years prior to Jesus. So it's about purifying ourselves, and it's about becoming better human beings. It's about ridding ourselves of all the delusions and ignorance and greed and jealousy, and developing within ourselves that wonderful capability of compassion, generosity, equanimity, kindness, etc., etc., etc. That will create in ourselves not only a better world for ourselves, for the people around us, but also for the entire environment, and will project us forward throughout the rebirths. But it also taught rebirth and reincarnation, as my friend here talked about. So the ideal being that in each rebirth, we ideally are going upwards, depending on what we do. He also said that when Buddha became enlightened, he said that he saw back 96 eons, now that's limitless time, of his own life, and that he had been every single being that existed. He had been male, female, he had been black, white, pink, he'd been, I don't know that they had the religions of his time there, the Hindu and faith and all these, but he had been gay and straight, and he'd been murdered and he'd murdered, he'd been raped and he'd raped, etc., etc. So through all of these, he'd been a snake, he'd been a bear, he'd been a hippopotamus, he'd been everything that exists. Through all of his teachings, therefore, we look at each and every living being on the planet, and we realize, we see that, as my friend said here, Namaste, we see the light within you, we see the God within you, and we see that in every living being. So I think ultimately our ideal is to see that in every living being, and by doing so we treat each other with mutual respect, with love, with compassion, with understanding, regardless of our differences.
I suppose I see them very much as connected. So Christians and others will believe that in some way we are made in the image of God. And the prayer that all Christians pray begins with the words, Our Father. And for me, that's a real clue, both to the question, who are we, and to the question, why are we here? So, first of all, the word Father, I don't understand that in any kind of literal biological sense, but more in a relational sense. The way I relate to God is in some way relational. God is a relational God. So that's one thing to say. And therefore, I suppose my answer to the question, who are we, is that we are all children of God. I suppose I can't get more basic than that. But the other clue for me is in that word, our Father. So I would want to say that all of us are children of God. And when Jesus was asked one day what is the most important commandment, he echoed the Torah and said, love God, but he added, love your neighbour. So I suppose then that becomes for me, if this is the commandment that Jesus said was the most important, then that has to be for me something of the purpose in our life. Why are we here? So I would say, one, to draw into a more close and loving relationship with God, and secondly, to love our neighbour, to draw into a more close and loving relationship with our neighbour. And you might say that actually you can't divide those things. You know, by drawing closer to God, in essence, if that's what we are doing, then surely we must, as a consequence, draw closer to our neighbour. One of my most loved books in the New Testament is the Epistle of John, and in there we read that very simple phrase, hackneyed to some extent, I guess, God is love. So if we are made in the image of God, and if God is love, then I would say our purpose is to love and to know that we are loved.
Fine. I'm afraid we have to draw question time, that question time, to an end because we have our final question for the panel. I've already indicated to you, without, and that's a bit of a hint, what is the role of interfaith dialogue in the world today? I suspect it's, I'm not going to answer for you completely, but it's to undo the kind of misconceptions, the lack of attraction that we've spoken of. But let's start with Norma, the role of interfaith dialogue.
Well, my role and my aim has always been outreach, to diffuse all the misconceptions about Judaism and to make it that it's understandable, because lots of the things that I talk about, people will go, it's barbaric, or it's ridiculous nonsense, or it's religious mumbo jumbo. And if I can possibly give explanations to why we do these things and why our faith still continues, people of our faith still continue to do these things, then I feel that I have achieved or tried to achieve something within this world of Swansea. I always find that young children are very interested and will absorb details. Sometimes I think it's the adults who don't, you know, and this is my concern. But I think that interfaith and getting together is a wonderful, wonderful vehicle. But the problem is, all of us here, panel and audience, we all know about it. But what about over there, out there?
I think all of us here seem really quite nice people. I mean, I hope you think that about me, but you all seem quite nice people. And it's been said that people who are using religion as a form of bigotry, shall we say, are not following the truth of their religion. That may well be so, but an awful lot of them seem to think they are. There are people of most of the religions of the world who are absolutely convinced that they are following the true faith of something or other, and they have been divinely told to go and murder other people because they think differently. I'm not very happy about them doing that. And so, as far as we are concerned, I believe as we can talk together as reasonable people who can recognise each other's common humanity and our care for ourselves, our children, other people, the world, and so on, we actually have a responsibility to challenge those bigots and present a different version of all faiths. But what we also see in the world is people using religion as an excuse to kill people or to harass them. In Britain at the moment, there's a lot of unpleasantness directed against Muslims. Now, it's not really being directed by people, mostly I think, who would call themselves Christians or who've got any true Christian faith. But there's a sort of pseudo-Christianity being used as an excuse to say, oh, the Muslims are different, we don't like them, and so on. And the same sort of thing is being used in other countries, by other religions, to say, well, because you're not a prop of this, we'll do this. Now, the people who are using religion for purposes of bigotry and oppression and greed and so on, well, I believe we have to challenge that.
And that's the purpose of interfaith.
And that's very much the purpose of interfaith. But there is one other thing I should say, that actually that pagans have been to a large extent victims for rather a long time. And for me personally to present things in interfaith, it's very important that people are aware of the pagan religion, that actually I'm not somebody who goes and eats babies or anything else unpleasant, the sort of thing that might have been said by some, and still is. And pagans are still being persecuted in the world. You may have heard when the Daesh were doing their crazy thing in Iraq, of a group called the Yazidi, and various atrocities, extensive atrocities perpetrated against them. Well, the Yazidi people are pagan. They celebrate the gods and goddesses of the old religions. And that same sort of thing is happening all over the world. Usually the pagans are the ones who just happen to be sitting on interesting bits of natural resources that nobody cared about till now. I wouldn't be surprised in the least if there's a group of African pagans sitting on a nice little patch of tantalum ore. And we know that in North America, native peoples have been sitting on nice little bits of uranium ore and all sorts of other things which nobody cared about until recently. They said, oh no, we'll just kick them off their land, we'll get rid of them. They don't count, they're just a bunch of stupid savages, etc. Well, you know, so I need to speak up for all the pagans of the world against the oppressions that are happening. And by speaking at the Interfaith Forum, I would hope to at least say something for all of them.
Thank you.
Well, it's a very difficult question. I think that if we can have some commonality and simply be able to convey that we should learn not to hurt anyone. Humans, animals, environment, and the idea that Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the whole world is the family, is our family. If one person, one nation, one organization wants to have a bigger piece of the cake, others will be deprived. They will be hurt. So everyone can be fair. I mean, we want to see our national growth, GDP, GNP, progress in 1.4%. All the politicians very happy. The prosperity. Is this prosperity continue to infinity? If you look at mathematics, it doesn't work. Everything has to come and stabilize. If it doesn't stabilize, everyone wants my part of the cake, bigger part of the cake. You can have at the expense of others. But if you take the whole world as a family, then you're snatching it from your son or daughter or your father. Stop.
Well, much like it's been said before, I come back to the command of Jesus to love your neighbour, and these people are my neighbours. We live now in a multi-faith world. It's no longer that people who are different from us live on the other side of the world. We live among people who are different from us. And so if I am to love my neighbour, then surely I need to know something more about my neighbour. And I need to learn when our different faiths, what we have in common, as has been said, what are the similarities. Of course that's absolutely fundamental. I don't think I want to pretend that we are all the same. We're not all the same. So perhaps once we learn to get to know each other and trust each other, not only can we find out what we share in common, but we can learn where we differ. And it won't matter that we differ. We don't have to agree. We just have to love our neighbour.
I think what happens is one of the problems we have, and Leslie touched upon it, if we say to the world, all religions are the same, there's no different religions. Then the question comes up, why are you disputing? Why don't you just form one common religion and get rid of all your differences? The truth is that we have different views. Whatever the beliefs are, where it comes from. It's very important we learn to respect those views. We may not agree with them, but we learn to respect them. Now there's two options. One is dialogue, which is the right word, and the other is debate. The problem with debate is it throws a lot of heat but no light. At the end of the argument, we are just in a sweat and we don't really get anywhere. And the second thing, you should really try and avoid debating with somebody who himself is not comfortable in his or her faith. And the more uncomfortable they are, the more they're eager to fight the other beliefs, just because somebody holds different. He's got to convince him or her that he or she is right. So this is the difference between interfaith dialogue and debate. Debate has its place, no problem. But it should be done with mutual respect. Now, the purpose of interfaith dialogue, I think, is very crucial in this society, in this time particularly. Because yes, it's okay, us representative of the faith, we're coming together, we all share bread together, we all drink coffee together, we all sit together. That message needs to penetrate the rest of our communities. It's very, very important that if we're going to live our faith, we must show mutual respect to fellow human beings. So what interfaith dialogue does, it shows us the human behind the label. Right? This is very important. I'm a label to you, a Muslim. And your experience with Muslim will always be a label until you meet me, drink coffee with me, then make a decision, I'm not really a good guy. Right? Oh, he's a nice guy. I like to know him more. Right? This is how it works. So interfaith allows us to see the human being behind the title. And then we can connect in this way. And we should work, in my view, on common causes that we agree on. We should work together. And this is the purpose of interfaith alliance. It's crucial in this time in society.
I think the purpose of interfaith dialogue is very evident, as Father John has already said, we've all agreed upon. It's to see the commonality in all of our belief systems, to work through the misbeliefs and the ignorance that we perceive of other faiths, of other races, of other genders, of other sexualities, or whatever it might be, and that we can slowly eradicate all of those through educating ourselves, educating our communities, educating our children especially, because they are the future. Sounds like a theme for a song, but of course it's and so breaking down all of the barriers and uprooting fundamentalism, because fundamentalism is not based, we all believe, fundamentalism is based in I am an ardent Buddhist, or I am an ardent Muslim or Christian or Jew, whatever it might be, that we believe we're giving 100%. Fundamentalism psychologically is based in anger. It's based in the need to be right, to be seen, to be correct, and to be true. My God is the only God. There can be no other, therefore I don't tolerate. I think all of that has to be uprooted, and slowly, with love, with compassion, with generosity, with understanding, with interfaith dialogue, we can work through that so that we can educate people to realize that he's my brother, gentleman, here's my brother, father, sister, etc., etc. And live in a peaceful life.
Thank you. Any of you seen the film called Mouse Hunt? Anybody? Hands up if you've seen Mouse Hunt. Yeah? If you haven't seen it, it's very, very funny. The principle, I won't tell you the story of the film, but there's the principle in it. A world without string is chaos. Yeah? What I think has emerged from the answers to the last question, a world without respect and understanding is chaos. And even if we've only done it in a very small way this evening, I think we've been able to demonstrate that there's immense respect, significant understanding, and as has already been said, commonality. We're not all going to suddenly become exactly the same, but we are certainly well on the road to greater respect and greater understanding. And that's one of the fruits of interfaith dialogue.